All right, welcome everyone to this webinar. So today we are going to be really working on understanding what's happening with Corona, with crisis fatigue. I'm going to review a little bit about what we talked about last week, and I'm going to share with you some new concepts that are going to help you to overcome and really work through what's going on in our brains right now. So crisis fatigue is a real thing. We have two parts to our brain. The lower brain is our survival brain. So some people call it the reptilian brain. I sometimes call it the toddler brain because it's like constantly saying, I want it, I want it. And the good thing about our lower brain is it actually it helped us survive when we didn't have grocery stores and we didn't have processed food, we didn't have refrigerators, and we didn't have homes that were safe, right? We didn't have locks and windows and all of that. We were living in makeshift kinds of places. So the lower brain really did helped us survive. And it has three purposes. It helped us to stay safe, right? We were constantly like having to make sure that our surroundings were safe, and it wanted us to seek pleasure. So it was like, we need to eat all the time, and it affected our sex drive because in order to reproduce our kind, we had to reproduce our kind. So that was another role of the lower brain. And then the other part was to conserve energy. So conserving energy is really interesting. You think about our habits. So when you first learned to brush your teeth, it was really kind of complicated. We're like, oh, I have like the front of my teeth I have to brush, and then the top of my teeth, especially in the molars, and then the back of my teeth, and I'm supposed to do it in a certain direction. It actually took a lot of effort to brush our teeth properly. And it was like, don't talk to me. I'm trying to learn how to brush my teeth. But it's now become habit. And so when it becomes habit, it's like, oh, I just automatically get all the angles. I actually really love my teeth. They were very expensive, but so I can like brush my teeth. I can listen to podcasts. I can even have I could have conversations. I can do all sorts of things, because something like that used to take a lot of effort, but now it's just routine. And so our lower brain likes that, because it's like, we need to conserve as much energy as possible. And so that's why, like, when we have a routine, like washing, like having a tidy house, if we can just make it like a routine, like I go to this bedroom, I make this bed, and then I wipe the counter, and then I do the sinks. And it's just like, you don't have to think about it and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We save a lot of energy. So that is what our lower brain wants us to do all the time. It wants us to conserve energy. It wants us to stay safe. And it really wants us to stay safe, conserve energy, and seek pleasure. That's what it wants. But we now have like houses and grocery stores and refrigerators and all of that. And as we know, we have a higher brain, and I call it like the CEO brain. It like wants the best for us. Now, the problem is, if our bodies are off kilter, so we have this lower brain that is telling us that there is danger, and we're constantly scanning for danger, then we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And the issue we have now is we have an actual pandemic. This is what we were wired to look out for. And this pandemic is it's like constantly happening, and we don't have an end in sight. And so it literally has taxed our brains more than we've ever experienced. And there's Eric Patterson, he's a licensed professional counselor in New York City. And he said, consider a person lifting weight. At first, they can lift 20 pounds very easily. But as repetitions increase, the muscle loses its strength. The movement becomes more challenging their form worsens, and eventually they fail to lift the weight at all. Crisis fatigue is the mental health equivalent. So while crisis fatigue is not a clinical diagnosis, it is an increasingly common phenomenon. It is on the rise because we have been confronted with an invisible virus that is creating havoc politically, financially, in our workplace, and in our home as well. And so another counselor, she said that there's a lot of research. There are a lot of people who are seeking help because they have a lot of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. This is all linked to crisis fatigue. So one of the things that are happening for, especially the people I work with, and as a quilter, we turn to our craft to be creative, and we really enjoy interacting with our friends that we have common things that we do together, right? We have our guilds, we connect, we have that connection, and that really brings us a lot of joy. And also with our families, we are limited in having family dinners and family get-togethers and all of that. Even being able to go out with our sisters and our mom and going like antique shopping or going out for lunch simply. It is not what we can do now. And so one of the problems is when our routine has been challenged, it's not like we aren't smart enough to figure out how to resolve our problems, but it's like going back to that lower brain of saying, oh, I have to figure this out again. It's like they all of a sudden said, the way that you learned to brush your teeth is all wrong. And now you have to learn a new way to brush your teeth. You're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a lot of work, because you have to like retrain your brain to do something. And it's going to have to take a lot more effort to get the teeth brushing in again. So it's the same thing with our life right now, is that we are having to it's like we're recreating the wheel. Like we have to come up with new ways to create comfort. We have to come up with new ways to make connection with people. We have to come up with new ways of really living the same meaningful life that we had before. So one of the things that I want to bring up, I'm going to talk about the different ways that we can cope with it better. But the first thing I wanted to bring up is when we have to think about new ways of doing things, so it's like new ways of doing things. We get to think about, we get to filter our life in a different way. Because what's going to start happening is we can actually start thinking, and I'm going to ask you this is one of my favorite emotions, because before COVID, there were actually lots of problems. There were problems. Everything wasn't great. And so one of the things that I want to ask is like, was it always amazing anyway? Or were there things that weren't so awesome? So if we can start learning to kind of question it, for example, I don't know if this applies to any of you, but my daughter had a tutor. And so on Thursday nights, I had to make sure she was at the tutor's house at a certain time. And then I had another kid that had another responsibility I had to get them to. And then I had to quickly rush her to this person and then get that kid to this thing. And then I had to rush back and get that to, that kid, and then do these things. And it was just a lot of driving and organizing and lots of different balls in the air. And now guess what? My daughter can go on Zoom and she gets her tutor. I don't have to go in a car. I don't have to wrangle anything. It's amazing. She just gets my laptop, or she goes on the house computer and she just gets her tutoring. So one of the things that I want to invite all of you to do is I want you to say, like with this filter, it's like, what is better in my life now? And so when you can flip it, so instead of saying, oh, in COVID this and COVID that, it's like, what is better now? Okay, so in the chat, I want you to contribute. What is something that you have discovered because of COVID that is better? Okay, I want to hear it. I'm going to give you another example. People now that it's very common to be on Zoom. Oh, you don't have to dye your hair. Oh, by the way, Mary, I got your Christmas card and those pictures are really good of you and your husband. Yeah, she doesn't have to dye her hair. What else? Oh, let's hear what other comments people have. You don't have to show up for the numerous meetings that were boring. You don't have to spend 3 hours a day commuting back and forth from work. Yes, right? Some people have discovered, saving money on eating out. Yes. Some people have discovered that they really prefer getting ordering their groceries online. Like that's something that so they're learning how to save time in ways that they never knew were possible before. Some people's businesses have gotten better because of COVID. There's a lot. Options have opened up for people more and more because of COVID, right? So I want you to think about like how this new idea of like, maybe it's not so bad, because it's not like our society was perfect before COVID. I mean, yes, it's pretty fun to go on an airplane and just go somewhere. I was thinking about last night, my husband fixed my hot tub. And so I'm pretty much out there every single night. Oh, telemedicine for some medical appointments. Yes, it's amazing. So you don't have to be sitting in the doctor's office waiting and waiting and waiting. But I was looking at the sky last night and I thought, oh, I sure miss flying. And then I thought, yeah, but there's a lot of, I'm home more. Because actually a year ago, this week, I was actually teaching at the Calgary Board of Education. I was teaching how to implement quilting in the curriculum. And I got to see my dad and I got to connect with some really cool people and have different experiences, right? So another thing that on this, and this is something I teach in my practice, is when we are looking for evidence of something, we will find it. It's actually called confirmation bias. So, oh yeah, you would never have found this group or me, right? So good. So when you're looking for evidence of something, you're going to find it. And what I learned, with my one-on-one clients this month, we are working on we're learning more about our estrogen and progesterone, and like how the womanly hormones affect us, whether we're in menopause or not. And one of the things so I have a specialist, and she's a coach, and she's a holistic practitioner. And she said that when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, our eyes actually see at a greater rate. And it was so interesting when she said that, because as a coach, I talk about that. When we are alerted, we have some danger, as a way to cope, we start becoming the police officer, and we start taking note, we start building a case file of what's going on. But we're looking for data for whatever we want to prove. So if we're looking at something with a negative bias, we are going to now collect all the negative evidence. So I like to say our brain is half positive, half negative. So if we're having this confirmation bias and we're looking for all the negatives of something, what starts happening? If we only look for the negative, that's all we're going to find. And so if all we're looking for is that, then guess what's happening with our life? You think about those old-fashioned scales, right? If it's all negative, we're going to be unbalanced, and we're not going to have that happy, balanced life that we want, whether it's Corona or not, whether it's, you know, Democrats or Republican, whether it's winter or summer, right? Whatever we focus on, that's what we'll find. So that was one of the things that I really wanted to bring to your thinking is, you know, yes, we're in a situation, but is it actually better or worse? And I would be curious if you were to write a list of things that are better because of Corona and things that worse, you would probably get 50-50 if you really started thinking about it. Because when I think about the benefits of Corona for our family is before I was like a human taxi, and now our family, we spend way more time together. We are in the hot tub and we have we make dinner together more. We always had dinner together, but sometimes it was in the car. But so like my kids are learning new skills that they would never have learned. We're having, you know, scripture study as a family in a more meaningful way than we've ever had. There's been so many benefits of being able to be at home. And I have my oldest son is going to be leaving. He's 18. He's almost finished high school. And so this has been a really amazing time that we can be together as a family. So those are some of the examples that if I really look at the positive and negative in my brain, then I can have that balance of no matter what crisis there is, if I'm looking for that evidence. But I had to get kind of curious, like, well, are things even, like, is it really that bad? Is it okay that I can just order my groceries online, or I can just have someone send them? So that is one of them. All right. Any questions about that point? Okay. So, okay. One of the next one I wanted to talk about was the idea of, so there's the new ways of thinking, and then the other one is paying attention to feelings. So when we have like a crisis like this, and it's our entire routine is disrupted. Even if you are a retired person, your routine has been disrupted. You're not going to the guild meetings. You're not having the family things or even the community things that you had. So one of the things I want to invite you to do is I want you to pay attention to your feelings. So this is the difference from being, I like to think about it this way, autopilot to being like GPS. Okay. So we once lived, we moved 1 kilometer away from we moved 1 kilometer away from one house to the other. And it was really interesting because if I was like really tired and I was driving, and our houses, well, they were only 1 kilometer away. So you still off the main drag, like a lot of the same driving was similar, but our new house you had to turn right sooner than before you just go down that road and then you turn left. And there was a couple of times where I was on autopilot and I just kept driving. I missed the right turn. And it was interesting because I didn't have to pay a lot of attention to my emotions, right? I just went on default thinking. But of course, and then I had to pay more attention to my new location. So think about that for yourself if you are on GPS. So a GPS is like saying, okay, in 1.2 kilometers, you're going to be turning left. In 0.8 kilometers, you're going to be turning left. And so you have to be paying attention to what it's telling you. And then, so it takes more energy. So initially it's going to pay more attention, but if you can trust the GPS, then it will take you in the direction that you want. So when you are aware of your feelings, you're paying attention to them, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Are these the feelings that I want? Because now you're actually paying attention, right? So now you're aware And when you're aware of your feelings, now you're being conscious, and now you're working from your upper brain. Because as humans, we are able to think about our thinking. And what I do with my clients in my group and my one-on-one is we actually start looking at your thoughts that were pretty much unchecked, right? You're kind of on autopilot. A thought is actually just a belief. A belief is just a thought that you've thought enough times that you're like, oh, that's what I just believe. But if you've never checked the belief in the first place, it's not serving you. So when you can be out, so with life coaching, what we do is we look at your thoughts and we say, hey, when you have that thought, how is that serving you? So I have a question for you. Who has heard the last 10 pounds is the hardest to lose? Put yay or nay in the chat. How many of us have heard the last 10 pounds is the hardest to lose? Okay, right. Have you ever questioned that? So I'm going to tell you a story. So when I got married, I weighed 164 pounds and I was running all the time. I was in my best shape possible. Okay. And I was thrilled. I loved being 164 pounds. I just thought it was the best ever. So I have, I get married, I have 5 kids, I'm doing all the things, and I pretty much lose. I almost get to 100, I get to like 170 in that range quite often. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Okay. Then I'm doing this work, losing weight, and really just being onto my mind, thinking about my thinking, right? I'm no longer on autopilot. I'm actually listening. GPS is my thoughts and I'm listening to them and I'm paying attention to them. It takes a little bit more effort, but I'm like, I'm all in, right? So I got to 170 and I did a photo shoot for my book and I was so pleased. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy with 170 pounds. This was just so amazing because I was at like over 200 and just felt so terrible about myself. And I actually remember thinking, I don't need to lose any more weight. I'm really happy with what I'm at. And it was so interesting because, I just weighed myself. That's just part of my habit. It was a good habit. I was like, I'm going to keep that one. And I'm like 168, 167, 160. And the next thing I knew, I was 164. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I was 162. And I really didn't have any intention to lose any more of that weight. And now my average is like between 148 to 152, 153. I'm like, okay, I guess this is what's going to happen. So when you pay attention to your feelings and you really clean up all those thoughts that aren't serving you, you can actually start living a life that I I never actually physically thought that I could be under 150. I'm 6 feet tall. I got bones and skin and hair, sometimes wild hair, right? Okay, so that is another one. Pay attention to your feelings. The third one. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Oh, this is a very squeaky. I just opened this marker. It's very squeaky. Okay, so in the chat, I want you to tell me what you think of when you think of self-care. Like if you were to say, if you were to schedule on your calendar, this is going to be a self-care evening. What would it be? What would you write? What would the actions be of self-care? I'm really curious. Let's see here. Eating what is good for my body, soaking in the tub with a cover over it to keep the heat in, a nice bath, reading journal, a long hot bath. Yeah. Okay, so why would those be good? Pampering skin and hair. Yeah. Reading. Yeah. Okay. So I want you to think about that. So I'm going to read a different way of self-care. Pampering. Okay, you guys got that? So when I think about self-care, I think of what am I going to do to take care of my brain? Because I want my brain to be at its highest capacity. I always want my brain to be in that CEO, because I got to tell you something. Our brain is not meant to retain information. It is not a filing system. It is not just for a bunch of information. Our brain is actually like a processing unit. So if we are constantly putting like so many thoughts in our brain all the time and putting so much in there and never really having an effective filter, I just learned this new concept today, ricochet rabbits. I usually say it's like a ping pong, right? It's just like our thoughts are just all over the place and it feels really chaotic. So have you ever felt that way where you're like, my life is just so much chaos? It's because you got ricochet rabbits going everywhere because you have this thought and then this thought and this thought. It's like ping pong all over. So the more calm you can be and the more you can be like aware of your thoughts and what's going on, right? This awareness. So my best self-care is for allowing my brain to be at its very best. So, and I say the more calm you are, the more success you're going to have. And so one of my best tools of self-care is journaling, because I got some pretty crazy thoughts. And if I don't challenge my thoughts, if I don't really look at them and see what they're doing, right? Because remember, if you keep thinking a thought, it just becomes a belief and then you don't question it anymore. That's just the way it works. And so if we haven't filtered, if we haven't like made sure that that thought is a good one or not a good one, then we're going to just repeat the same negative thought, which is now a belief, and we don't even question it. And so we're thinking, why am I still getting the same results all the time? Why am I so exhausted when I wake up every morning? Why can't sleep at night? Why do I get so mad about my husband or whatever that is? All right. So my self-care is to be the best CEO. So I want to have the cleanest mind. And life coaching truly is saying, like you and me, it's like imagine you and me on the couch and we're like looking at your life and we're seeing what's working and what's not. It's like cleaning out a 4-car garage. You know, you just keep putting stuff, shove. You don't want to deal with it, shove it in the garage or it's in the basement or whatever. And now we're just cleaning out those boxes. Like, do we want to keep these? Do we not? Okay. And part of it can be like when you talk about pampering your skin and taking long baths, it's like, I'm taking care of you, body. You're tired. I've expected a lot from you today. You've done a lot of cleaning. You've done a lot of taking care of other people. I'm taking care of you. Let's rest. Let's do this. Okay. So the other part of that, wow, squeakiest marker ever. Monitoring your self-talk. So one of the things that I really am curious, how often, if you were to say from 1 to 10, how often of the thoughts you have about yourself are positive? Things like, hey, I'm so proud of you. Way to go. I really like the way that you helped out that, you solved that problem. Okay. So monitoring your self-talk literally affects your hormones in your body. So one of the things that we're learning in the one-on-one group is if you are low in estrogen, so if you get, it affects your, the way if you're feeling like kind of depressed, if you don't really have a very high sex drive, if you don't feel very, if you're not really feeling good about yourself, it's a lot of it, you have really low estrogen, because your estrogen is like the happy hormone. Okay. And we do know that we have a cycle. And even if you if you have a menopause, you still have a cycle. And even if you have a hysterectomy, you still have a cycle. We're just not having the period part, but we're still having day one, estrogen goes up for 15 days, then it cuts off, and then progesterone goes up, and then it cuts off. Because our estrogen and progesterone aren't produced from our ovaries and everything. It comes from other parts of our body. So we're still having cycles every month where we're having anxiety, we're having more, all of that. And if we're not aware of what's going on, and if we are not monitoring our self-talk, then we are like depleting the estrogen in our body. So we're not putting ourselves up for success. Okay. Any questions about that? Right. And I want you to know that, and this is one of the things I talked about last week in the training, was about 50-50. Life is supposed to be 50-50. Like, to have a balanced life, we need to have negative and positive. So when I was, so I think to myself and my clients, I say, so what's your ideal life? And they're like, I want to have joy. I'm like, well, guess what? If you want to have joy, that means you're going to have some pain, guaranteed. Because you actually aren't able to feel and recognize joy if you don't have the opposite. But we don't make a big deal of when we're having the discomfort. We're like, oh, that's just the part of the day that's not supposed to be great. So the goal is not to have a life where it's rainbows and daisies all the time, but we also don't have to make a big deal of when things are not awesome. We're like, oh, this is just the 50. Like yesterday when the guy called and said, so your radiator is shot because your pipes are corroded where you had the coolant, and you just drove the van without any coolant, which was not me. This is what you have teenage children. They don't listen, and that's fine. Like when I was a teenager, did I totally understand all of that? And so it's like, okay, so now we just have to pay $1,500 to get the van fixed. So it's not like I'm super happy and like jumping in for joy for that, but I'm also not making a big deal. You're like, oh, okay, this is what happens when you have a vehicle of that age, and that's all. Okay, so really important. Monitoring your self-talk is a game changer. And so when I talk about losing 50 pounds without counting calories and exercising, so much of this changed for me. And I'm really paying attention to that. And the more I pay attention to my self-talk, is the more relaxed you're going to be in your life and the more weight you're going to lose. It's just going to keep happening. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you one more, and then I'm going to coach. Put your hand up and you get coached. Okay. I have a bunch here. I'm just trying to decide which one. Okay. This is a good one. Okay. The next one is giving permission. So what does that mean to give permission? And you think about it. So the topic is, we have this crisis fatigue. Our body is going into this fight, flight, or freeze mode. It is where our lower brain is wanting us to scan for all the dangers, and we have a legitimate danger. We have people are dying. People are dying in a terrible way. They're dying alone in a hospital. They're dying. And people who have had corona are, they actually don't even know what's going to happen. Like they don't know if things are going to get worse. Like they've healed, but they don't know if they're going to have continual problems with their lungs. They don't know if they're going to come back. There's a lot of uncertainty, right? We just don't know. So we can, when you give yourself permission, what do you think that might mean? We can give ourselves permission to feel all the feelings. Now, it kind of goes back up here to being aware, right? We want to allow ourselves to be aware of what's going on, and then we want to give permission to feel it. So, how many of us grew up with pull up your bootstraps? Suck it up. We don't have time for this. Let's make some cookies. Here's a sucker. Okay. So many, and we didn't know. We didn't have the same information that we have now. We didn't have the same awareness of how the mind works. There was never really a talk about this like lower brain and higher brain. Like that wasn't really in any of our awareness. And so one of the things that if we can give ourselves permission, so when we are sad, so when we do watch the news and when we do hear about, I have a client whose father-in-law was at risk of losing his foot with corona, and her whole family got corona. Like giving yourself permission to be really sad about it and not judge yourself. Have you ever done that before? How often can you just say, I'm going to just be sad and it's no big deal? Because what this is doing is it's honoring our emotions. It's saying it's totally fine to feel sad, because in order to feel sad, we actually get to feel joy. And it's totally fine to feel disappointment. And because when we feel disappointment, that means we're actually allowed to also feel satisfaction. And we want to live a life where we always feel, this, what's another positive emotion that we just, hope. It's going to be fear, right? So this is beautiful. You're like, oh, and I can actually just let myself sit on the couch and feel sad. And I can go in the car and I can cry. I can do all those things. So some other tips so last week we talked about like the buffering, we talked about the 50-50. But today we talked about this of being curious, like saying, maybe it wasn't awesome in the first place. Some other tips here is, thinking differently. This may be easier said than done, but realize there are some things you can't control, such as rising case numbers or the behavior of other people. Instead, focus on the things you can. For example, restricting your grocery shopping at once a week, and recognize that we're in an ever-changing world, which may be quite different 3 months from now. So, being able to give yourself taking that responsibility. And I talked about that last week as well. So practicing this mindfulness and meditation. This allows you to be in the present moment and not worry about the future or fret over the past. It can be done anytime and anywhere. And the more you practice, the better you feel. So that's like giving yourself permission. It's like monitoring your self-talk. It's like you are in charge of you. And I do really like this, like taking that responsibility for you, because you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And so instead of looking outside of you and saying, well, look at the neighbor, it's like you just be the CEO of yourself. Another thing you can do is give yourself a COVID break. You're like, you know what? We're just not going to talk about COVID today or for the next hour or 4 hours. So we're just going to do that. The other thing, I like this one, and I talked a little bit about this last week and beginning of this class, is we're going to make things into habits. So it's like, I just always have a mask. I just always have a mask in my purse. I always have a mask in my coat pocket, and it's just like a habit. And I have hand sanitizer in my car, and I just have, when I get gas, I just like get the gas, do the thing, put the hand sanitizer on. It just becomes part of my habit. So I don't have to think about it anymore. So you just have that step in there. So that is, I really like that suggestion. And every time you have this feeling of resistance, just pay attention to it and think, wonder where this resistance is coming, right? My favorite emotion. All right. I told you I would leave time for coaching. So now this is the portion of the time where you get to raise your hand and ask for coaching. So this, on the bottom of the screen, there is like a little hand that looks like this, and you can just press on that, and I can see, and I can call you up, and you can be on the screen beside me, and I can coach you. So it could be on anything with Corona. It could be anything with you finding yourself maybe not being at your ultimate. Maybe it is you finding yourself feeling more drained than usual. Maybe it's you finding yourself spending more time on social media than you wanted, or eating more, maybe snacking. Maybe it's you're having a harder time sleeping, and you're not, when you wake up, you don't feel as rested. Are these some of the symptoms that any of you are facing? What about making decisions? How hard is it for you to make a decision and then stick with that decision? Are you finding that's a challenge? Another thing that could be causing you to feel this way is if you are not finishing things like you used to. If you find yourself procrastinating a little bit more than you would like. Are these things happening for you? Are you saying, like, I'm just going to do this for 10 minutes? Like, let's say you go on social media or watching a movie or reading a book, and the next thing you know, it's like 2 hours, and you're like, where did that time go? Are any of these things happening for you? What about with your relationships with people? Are you finding there's a lot of, like, if that person would just, if you're kind of blaming somebody for something, there's some bitterness, you're feeling a little bit out of control. Like, why is that person always doing this? You're not feeling like you are totally responsible, or that like you're giving that to other people. So these are things that could possibly be happening. So if you want to get coached on other things, just raise your hand. I got you. What are your thoughts? Are you affected by someone with COVID? About your town? Is there some bitterness? Talk to me. Okay. Oh, interesting. So one of the panelists, do you want to get coached on that? So she said, I have cried over my grandkids not getting a normal childhood. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. So Lori, if you want to come on, oh, here, I got a hand up here. Who is it? Oh, it is Lori. Okay, I'm going to bring you on. Promote to panelist. All right, while she's getting on here. So this is a tool that I use in all my coaching. Hey, Lori, thanks for being so brave. I know it's a big deal. They're like, I don't know.
I can already feel the tears welling up in me again over it. It's just, I've cried and worked through it like 3 or 4 times now, but it's just one of those things that.
All right. So the circumstance is grandchildren, right?
Yeah.
And then the thought is they're not getting a normal childhood.
Yeah.
Okay. They aren't getting a normal childhood. And when you have that thought, how do you feel?
Very sad.
Okay. What else do you feel? Let's just talk about your emotions. Like all the emotions that come up when you have that thought.
It's not fair.
Okay. So you feel, I'm just going to put it over here. So you feel sad. You feel like it's unfair. What else do you feel?
I just want this silly virus to be over so that things can get back to normal.
Okay. So there's some impatience.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So of sad, unfair, impatient, what do you think is probably the most common feeling?
Probably unfair.
Okay. All right. So when you feel like things are unfair, what do you do?
I cry. I don't look after myself as much. I get mad at the government for not letting us do what we want to do, not being able to visit with them and socialize with them the way that we used to. Like, it really bothers me that we can't do our Sunday family suppers anymore. And
yeah. So you get really upset about Sunday dinners. Okay. What else do you do? When you feel it's unfair and you have that thought they aren't getting a normal childhood.
I just feel really, really sad for them and bad for them. And
yeah. So, look at what was happening here. So when you spend your time crying and not looking after yourself and mad at the government because of the restrictions, right? It's like, oh, darn you, government. And then you really get upset about this, like, you had such a good thing going, right? These Sunday dinners.
Yeah.
So when you spend all your time doing that, what is the result you're having for you?
I'm not looking after myself. I'm not having a normal life.
Right. So your life, your everyday life is feeling very what?
Very restricted, very.
Are you having a balanced life?
No.
Right? Are you having a happy life? No. You're so focused on all the negative.
Yeah.
That you aren't giving yourself the opportunity to have like anything positive from this.
Yeah. Until you said, well, earlier I managed to catch when you were talking about what are the positive things that had happened with Corona. And then I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And until then, I had never ever thought about all the positive things that have come out of it. It's always just been the negative things.
So you aren't having you're not having a normal life.
No.
I guess I could just say that, right? Like,
yeah.
Because a normal life is like a happy, normal life is a balance of 50-50.
Yeah.
Right? And right now your life, so I was just doing this for a client today. It's like negative, 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 negative. Everything you're thinking is just all negative.
Yeah.
So you're not even giving yourself that opportunity, because when your brain is always going to the negative, and remember how I talked about like you're looking for evidence?
Mm-hmm.
It's just constant. And so if everything is negative, it's like it's all sitting on the negative, and there's never any positive that's going to balance it out.
Yeah, I've been looking for all the negative things that have been going on with Corona instead of any of the positive things that.
Right. So no wonder it's terrible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Marlene says Zoom meetings with all of our 5 children and their grandchildren has been wonderful since they all over the country. Right. And before she wouldn't be able to see them. So like, even with my parents, I didn't ever FaceTime them, but now it's like every Sunday I FaceTime my parents, guaranteed. Yeah. And it's so good. Okay. So Lori, you did not wake up in the morning and say, guess what, Lori, you're going to be a real jerk to yourself.
No.
It'd be like really unbalanced and terrible. No. None of us do that, by the way. Okay. This is the other problem when I talked about like the negative self-talk, because right now you could be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I figure this out? No, we don't punch ourselves in the face.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
No,
like, no
I try not to.
Right? But you're like, no wonder I was feeling so bad, because when I have this thought, they aren't getting a normal childhood, I feel like it's unfair. What would it be like if you're like, my grandchildren are having an extraordinary childhood. They get to live through a pandemic. That's so crazy and cool. Remember when we had Halley's Comet? Do you remember that?
Yeah. It was going to crash into the earth and kill us all. And
right. But like, do you remember, you're like, Halley's Comet only comes like once every, 400 years or something?
Yeah.
You're like, I get to see Halley's Comet. This is the coolest.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Your grandkids are going to be telling their grandkids, oh, I lived through the pandemic of 2020.
Yeah.
And I used to have to visit my grandma through the computer or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So even, okay, this is be really helpful. Even looking at these tips that I gave you guys today in this training, it's like, hey, there's just some really good things that could actually come from it. Maybe.
Yeah.
Like
they're learning all about germs and being very clean and washing their hands.
Right. And they're learning how to maybe spend more time with their parents. Maybe the parents are stepping up more than they ever have.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but if you have this thought, it's unfair, you're actually not even giving them the opportunity that they could grow in a way that could be amazing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for you.
Yeah.
Like, what would it be like? Even you could take a simple example, like family dinners. What was so special about family dinners?
It was the time we all spent together.
Okay. So what you really are missing is time together. And how do you feel when you had time together with your family?
I felt loved. I really enjoyed cooking for them. It was always nice to be able to cook for them and come up with a nice dessert. So again, that was my way of showing them how much I love them, of course.
Okay.
Centering things around food.
Your family lives in town, right?
Yes, one of them does. Yeah.
Okay. What would it be like for you? So by the way, everything we do in life is because we want to feel a certain way. But what would it be like, Lori, if you actually still made them Sunday dinner You put them in containers. You got in your car. Oops, that's a truck. And you drove it to them every Sunday.
Yeah, I could do that. I thought about it.
What would that be like? And they're like, back in 2020, 21, when the pandemic, my grandma, she came and brought us dinner every Sunday because she loved us.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I haven't made them mac and cheese for a really long time, so I'll have to do that for them again.
Right? But like I want all of you to look at your action lines and say, okay, why am I doing that? What is happening here? And I mean, you do feel like it's unfair. So when everything is unfair, that influences how you act.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can start getting curious about your action, like here, like I'm upset about Sunday dinners. Oh, why am I upset? Oh, it's because I feel love. Oh, can I still feel love? Can I still show them love? Right? Problem solved.
Yeah.
You're creative.
Mm-hmm.
Here, mad at the government. It's like, am I really mad at the government?
No, I'm just frustrated with their rules. I want them to change their rules so that
You're like, I want to be the exception.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But when you can start looking at your actions and like you're not looking after yourself, you're like, what? That is really unfair that I'm being such a jerk to myself. I got to stop that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then cry. It's okay to cry.
Yeah.
No big deal. You're like, of course. No big deal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something, I mean, I'm taking a little deeper for you. But for all of you who's watching this and listening, I want you to think about everything we do in life is because we want to feel a certain way. And we didn't wake up thinking, I'm going to be unfair and be a jerk to myself. But if we don't capture our thoughts, it's like we're like a 4-year-old in a candy store that's unsupervised. We're going to just go crazy.
Yeah.
So we have to watch our brains. Really important. All right. So how do you feel now, Lori? Tell me your thoughts.
I'm feeling much better now. Like I just, yeah.
What feels better? What exactly feels better?
I feel more at peace about the situation because it's like, okay, well, yeah, because before I never really looked at what they were gaining from this. It was always just what had been taken away from them.
Right.
And what they had to do. They had to wear the masks and all of the rest of it. And I never looked at, okay, well, they're going to get this benefit and this benefit. And
so, you got this.
mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone. That is our webinar for today.